Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to dive straight into a really an unsettling truth that just kept leaping out from all our sources. And this isn't just about leadership theory. It's about spiritual sustainability. Here's the core finding. Most ministry leaders, they don't burn out because they stop loving God. They burn out because they're asked to function, to produce, to perform, long before they are, well, truly formed.
That's a diagnosis that really it challenges the whole structure of how we do things today. The source material we looked at reveals this the systemic conflict. The modern church has become exceptionally good at deploying people. I mean, we get strategy, efficiency, scaling. We're great at that.
We are. But we've become remarkably poor at the other side of the coin.
At forming them.
Exactly. It's like we've probably, without intending to, inverted the entire foundational architecture of spiritual work. I mean, think of it like trying to build a huge skyscraper, a 50-story building, but you decide that the concrete foundation, the deep, slow work of resilience and rootedness.
That's optional.
Right. It's optional enrichment, something you can, get to once the structure's already up.
And we all know what happens when you skip the foundation. The sources are so consistent on this point. Character was meant to be cultivated in obscurity long before influence was ever entrusted in public.
So faithfulness in the hidden life was the core credential.
It was. But today, it's all about visibility and competence. Those are what get prioritized.
And that's the inversion. So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack the predictable, costly consequences of this reversal. We're talking fractured teams, exhausted leaders, and growth that's just, well, fragile. And we want to recover that ancient wisdom that insists on formation first. Why are we so desperate to prioritize function over depth?
Ultimately, I think we're examining the really painful human and spiritual cost of a systemic problem.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with what the researchers were calling the silent epidemic. This isn't the kind of burnout where a leader just, stops showing up. It's something deeper. A quieter depletion that settles right into the bones of people who are still leading, still preaching, still producing, but inwardly they're completely empty.
Yeah, and the sources suggest that the greatest threat to the church today might not be secularism or persecution or something external. It might be this profound internal exhaustion of its own workforce.
And this exhaustion, like you said, it isn't accidental. It's structural.
It's structural. Modern ministry systems are often, and sometimes explicitly, structured to extract output, to get stuff done before cultivating any kind of depth. The culture rewards what's visible, immediate results, competence, things you can measure, and it often overlooks the internal health of the leader who's delivering those results.
Which is the perfect definition of the function first trap.
Yeah.
We fast-track training on preaching, on management, on strategic planning, and we just kind of assume that the spiritual maturity will just...
It'll catch up later.
It'll catch up. We teach people how to do God's work, but not how to be rooted in God.
Yeah.
So they get the skill to function, but they never develop the inner resource to endure.
And this is where we run straight into the danger of what the material calls the machinery mindset. We start to see ministry through the lens of, say, a factory foreman instead of a gardener. We optimize the systems, we track the metrics, and we treat people...
Volunteers, staff, everyone.
Everyone primarily as resources to be deployed and maximized. It's like treating the soul like a standardized widget, which it is absolutely not.
Wow, that comparison just hits hard. Because when you treat people like standardized widgets, then spiritual formation, it naturally becomes optional, doesn't it?
Or at least something you postpone. We'll get to that after we hit the capital campaign goal or once things stabilize.
But a spiritual life doesn't just stabilize on its own.
Not at all. And when you operate with this formation deficit, the consequences are, well, they're utterly predictable. The sources list several key symptoms, and they are failures of discipleship, not failures of effort.
Okay, give us the big three. Because I think everyone listening can probably place these symptoms in their own experience somewhere.
All right, the first is burnout without clarity of calling. This is doing immense amounts of God's work without any real communion with God himself. The activity is frantic, but the intimacy is gone.
Okay, what's second?
Second is skill without discernment. The leader is incredibly competent, maybe exceptionally gifted, but their wisdom lags way behind their technical ability. They know how to build something big, but maybe not if they should, or how to manage the conflict that always comes with scale.
And the third one, the one that I feel like causes the most public collapse.
Influence without integrity. This is where the platform expands faster than the leader's internal character can possibly support it. The system prioritizes rapid scaling and visibility, so it incentivizes people to hide their weaknesses.
And that rapid growth, It's fueled by external validation, and it creates this huge spiritual debt.
A debt that always comes due. If we connect this to the bigger picture, I mean, the cost is just immense. It isn't just organizational. It's pastoral, it's personal, it's profoundly spiritual. A ministry can look wildly successful on the outside, growing numbers, big budget, while it's hollowing out its own leadership team.
So the leaders appear successful, but quietly, privately, they're disengaging from the very source they preach about.
Exactly. And this whole crisis is just supercharged by modern culture, which actively replaces that biblical idea of apprenticeship with, well, pure acceleration.
We want fast results. If someone is gifted, we put them on the fast track to a position of high visibility based on their productivity, and we just assume they have the maturity to handle it.
And that's why the sources so powerfully reframe the idea of burnout. We often treat burnout as this individual failing. If only that leader had better boundaries, or if they just managed their time better.
Right, it's all on them.
But while personal responsibility does play a role, the sources argue that burnout is fundamentally a cultural outcome.
Hold on, I want to pause on that for a second. Isn't setting boundaries still the leader's responsibility? I mean, are we letting people off the hook here by just calling burnout cultural?
That's a critical question. And the source material isn't saying leaders have no responsibility at all. It's saying the system is rigged against them. It's sort of like putting a worker in a toxic environment full of fumes and then blaming them for getting sick. Burnout is the predictable result of systems that neglect rhythms of genuine rest and that measure success almost exclusively in quantity.
Attendance, budget, initiatives launched.
All of it. Leaders become the canaries in the coal mine. They're just revealing that the air itself is corrosive.
So we've fallen into the metrics trap. We're trapped by this productivity paradigm. And we're measuring success like a corporation measures market share, ignoring all the qualitative, almost unmeasurable things that Christ actually valued.
Like spiritual depth or patience or hidden faithfulness.
Things you can't put on a spreadsheet.
Exactly. And the problem goes right to the heart of identity, which is why the theological misstep here is so crucial. When a leader's identity gets tied to their performance, to their usefulness in the system, burnout becomes inevitable. They start to confuse usefulness with belovedness.
And ministry becomes this frantic effort to prove their worth.
Instead of a peaceful outflow of their relationship with God, yes.
And when you start operating from that place, from proving your worth instead of resting in your identity, you run straight into that urgent dilemma from Mark chapter 8. What does it profit a church to gain influence, momentum, and visibility? To gain the whole world, really while losing its leaders' souls? I mean, the material makes it so clear. Activity without intimacy is not just ineffective, it is spiritually dangerous.
It forces us to stop asking how many programs are we running and to start asking what kind of people is our ministry forming. The antidote to this entire inverted paradigm is actually a return to the master strategy itself.
And that master strategy, of course, is Jesus in the formation of the 12. The sources present this not as just some nice Bible story, but as the intentional, formation-centered leadership strategy that we have to recover. Jesus didn't start with platforms or mass movements. He started with 12 people, patiently forming them, and only then releasing them into a mission.
The foundational sequence, it's captured perfectly in Mark 3:1. It says, "He appointed 12 that they might be with him and that he might send them out to preach." Just notice the order there. It is absolutely non-negotiable, being preceded doing. For 3 years, their primary job was proximity, observation, shared life. That was the curriculum.
I think we often just gloss over the significance of that phrase, that they might be with him. What did that actually look like in practice?
Well, it was slow, it was deliberate, and it was deeply relational. They saw Jesus handle conflict when the Pharisees criticized him. They saw him handle failure when he couldn't heal someone right away. They watched him manage his own fatigue, modeling Sabbath and retreat, like we see in Mark 6.31.
So the formation was happening in the hidden spaces.
Yes, around tables, along roads, in these intense private conversations. Proximity was the pedagogy.
And it wasn't always peaceful retreats, right? It involved confrontation and correction, too. We see the disciples constantly arguing over who was the greatest or trying to claim some kind of status. And Jesus used those moments of imperfection as teaching opportunities to shape their character.
Crucially, and this is so important, Jesus used failure as a formation tool. I mean, look at Peter. He was impulsive. He failed spectacularly with his denial, but that post-resurrection restoration in John 21, it confirms the principle. Leadership is entrusted based on transformation and reconciliation and restored character. not on flawless performance.
Not an immediate competence. The process was relational and required grace.
Absolutely. It was iterative.
And this formation-first model, it isn't just some biblical ideal we look back on wistfully. Our source is connected to these really powerful historical echoes that affirm how necessary it is.
They do. The early church understood this so deeply. Their process of catechesis, which was the preparation for baptism, was slow, it was immersive, and it often lasted for years.
Years, not a weekend class.
Not at all. They weren't concerned with maximizing their membership numbers. They prioritized a faithful witness and enduring character because they understood that formation requires immersion into a whole new way of life, not just quick intellectual agreement.
And later on, we saw the same pattern. As ministry culture outside the monasteries became more and more functional, more focused on, say, political influence.
The monastic movements preserved that vital insight that spiritual practices, prayer, silence, study, work were essential infrastructure for the soul. They weren't optional luxuries for the religiously inclined. They knew if you lose the interior life, the exterior work just collapses.
The historical evidence seems to suggest that whenever the church emphasizes mission, the doing, without simultaneously emphasizing discipleship, the being, it just inevitably produces functional competence without spiritual endurance.
Every time.
So, if that's the diagnosis, how do we start to operationalize this countercultural solution today? It feels like we have to shift the fundamental focus in our ministries from asking what needs to be done to asking who are we becoming?
That's the core shift. Formational leadership has to prioritize presence over performance. It has to prioritize endurance over short-term visibility.
So what does that look like?
It means we have to intentionally recover apprenticeship as the primary biblical paradigm. We're talking about the Elijah shaping Elisha, the Paul mentoring Timothy kind of relationship. And this is not information transfer like reading a manual or attending a seminar. This is life transfer. It's immersive, it's relational, it's long-term guidance where the mentor actually allows the apprentice to see them fail, to see them reflect, and to see them recover.
The goal isn't cloning competence.
No, the goal is to reproduce maturity in others.
And this demands a really deep countercultural shift toward valuing hidden faithfulness. Jesus told his followers in Matthew 6 to give, pray, and fast in secret, so their Father who sees in secret would reward them. The sources highlight that character is always forged in obscurity, and this protects leaders from what they call the tyranny of visibility.
That constant pressure to perform for the public gaze, yeah. And to build a truly sustainable ministry, these formation-first practices, they have to be institutionalized. They need to become part of the actual structure, not just a nice suggestion.
Okay, give us some concrete, actionable practices the sources point to.
First, modeling and institutionalizing Sabbath and retreat. This means treating rest, citing Jesus in Mark.Chapter 6, not as an optional break, but as a mandatory, non-negotiable rhythm of ministry. If the leader doesn't take a Sabbath, their team won't feel permitted to either.
That's a huge structural change. What's another one?
The sources strongly suggest developing assessment criteria that explicitly measure spiritual health and relational maturity alongside external competencies. We have to look at things like emotional health, humility, teachability. How do we measure patience in a high-pressure team setting, for example?
It's observing meeting dynamics, I guess, but it's also asking the right questions, isn't it?
It is. It's asking, does this person quickly forgive? Do they listen well? Do they take constructive criticism without getting defensive? These are the qualitative measures that really demonstrate the fruit of the Spirit in action.
Okay, and finally?
Finally, creating intentional apprenticeship structures where mistakes are genuinely seen as learning opportunities, not as immediate disqualifications. Leadership development has to be patient and structured, not just fast-tracked based on who is available or who seems the most gifted on a stage.
So ultimately, this whole solution means redefining the metrics of success entirely.
Completely. We have to define success based on spiritual depth, not numerical breadth. The ultimate measure becomes the fruit of the Spirit from Galatians 5. Love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. That is the only reliable predictor of a leader's endurance and a community's genuine resilience.
It seems like the church has to intentionally move beyond this illusion of vitality, where a lot of noise and activity just masks a deep spiritual fragility, and return to a more soul-centered perspective. So what does this all mean?
It means we have to commit to a fundamental reordering of our priorities. Function must flow from formation. Depth has to consciously outweigh speed. And hidden faithfulness must be aggressively valued over public display. I mean, the future health and the enduring witness of the community depend entirely on recovering its original vocation as a community that is defined by spiritual formation.
The question is no longer whether the church can afford to slow down for formation. The real question posed by these sources is whether it can afford not to. If endurance and resilience are the ultimate measures of success, what unseen habits or rhythms must you cultivate today to ensure lasting fruit in your own life and work?